Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstead and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstead, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. We are talking training camp still, but previewing the second preseason game between the Seahawks and the Titans coming up this Saturday afternoon. And we are going to do a little bit too early prediction on the 53-man roster. We've seen one game. We've seen kind of how players are being used, which players now are standing out to us over the course of training camp. And so we're going to kind of preview our roster. Officially, the roster is cut down on August 27th by 1 p.m. Pacific. And then the next day, the ability to have your practice squad put together happens. So we're going to try to predict that a little bit. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, this cut down prediction was kind of weird. I was expecting it to be easier. But there were some decisions that had to be made that I don't feel good about.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was easy. Like, this is one of the easiest predictions that I've ever put together, I think.
Really?
Fairly cut and dry. Yeah, there's some players that I would love to see retain on the practice squad that I'm cutting, but nobody I'm really going to miss on the active 53. I don't think. And there's a couple of ways this thing for me you could go. Like, do you carry 4 running backs or 3? Do you carry 9 offensive linemen or 10 or maybe 11? But you keep like 4 or 3 tight ends instead of 4. And most of those questions for me were on the offensive side.
Yeah.
The defensive side for me was pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, there was one. There's like basically one surprise cut, which I don't really think it's a cut. It's more of a trade possibility that I threw in there. But other than that, the defense was, more cut and dry. But the offense had some moving parts that made it a little more of a challenge. So
before we get to that, quickly, maybe we can kind of go through what we're hearing in camp, what's standing out, what's kind of going on a little bit. I know that Mike McDonald said they'll go full pads in both practices, and they have been, including the practice they're currently doing as we're recording on Thursday morning here. And the starters would get a lot of reps in those practices, but then no reps during the game. So he's pretty much going to hold out all the veteran guys and all the starting players.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of backups, a lot of depth, a lot of guys that won't make the roster are going to be the ones playing this week, which actually had to do with why they chose to do the joint practices. Reading some comments that he made is that they want to be able to practice everything, but and again in live, in a live situation like this, but they don't want to produce tape for everyone. And so doing this because these practices aren't recorded in any way, they were able to practice other stuff and run plays that they can't during the game because they don't want to put that stuff on tape. And
how do you feel, though, about starters maybe not even likely playing very much at all in the preseason?
I don't mind it that much. It's kind of what happened when they went to 3 preseason games is you lost that game where the starters played like half a game. And that's really the one that gets axed in favor of getting the other guys a lot more reps for learning and evaluation. And it's unfortunate, but when they cut down to 3 games, something had to give. And so they felt it more important to have those evaluation reps than it was to have the the ones for the starters.
So talk to me a little bit about what your impression is so far about the way that McDonald is approaching training camp and the intensity level, all that kind of stuff. The stark differences between kind of a Pete Carroll run camp and McDonald, and kind of how you feel about that.
Well, I mean, there has been a level of intensity, which is why you're starting to see guys get chippy and their fights and that kind of stuff, because guys are competing hard on every rep, and they're out there to work. When Pete Carroll was here, yeah, you had some of that. I mean, you did, because these are super competitive guys and all of that. But you also they were out there to have some fun, right? That's why they would. The music was blaring. They would end practice by making offensive linemen try and catch punts, and that kind of stuff. And you don't see any of that under McDonald. They're to work and get better and get ready for the season. It's just a different mindset, different thought process. It's not. I'm not going to say that Pete Carroll's way is wrong, because training camp and practices are long, and it gets to be a major drag. And so keeping it loose and fun and that kind of stuff actually helps them get through all of camp without, it just becoming monotonous quite so bad. So there's pluses and minuses to both ways, but I've liked what I've seen from McDonald. I like they're there to work, and it's very workmanlike, and they're just continuing to make progress in every phase. So it's been a good training camp for McDonald.
Yeah, no, I've definitely liked what I've seen in that. I think it translates on the field into a competency level that's increased from prior seasons, and then the communication level and the details, getting the details nailed down early. I think that was evidenced in that first preseason game, and that there wasn't a lot of mistakes. There wasn't a lot of penalties. Players were in the right positions, even down into the depth charts. And I think we'll continue to see that. I think that's one of the benefits of this sort of approach. Okay. So in today's practice, I just thought I'd throw this out there. Condata tweeted, highlight of the day, Witherspoon jumps a wheel route in team session for a pick, runs down the sideline to find Jamal Adams, now with the Titans, and hands him the ball. Lots of back and forth between those two today. That's just a fun little tidbit. But things are going well in these practices in general. Players are standing out. DK Metcalf is standing out in this session. Tariq Woolen is standing out. Now Witherspoon. There's just a lot of players. It seems like we're taking advantage of that discipline that we've just been talking about, and the execution and so forth. And we're kind of translating that over into another, kind of dominating another team in practice sessions. It seems like dominating. Now it's our own beat writers and our own writers kind of translating what they're seeing on the field into something that's going to be a feel good for Seahawks fans to read. I'm sure they're making some plays on the other side of the ball as well, but it does seem like we are kind of clearly a better organization right now.
Which makes sense. We're in different stages of, a rebuild. They're at least a year behind. And so Seattle should be, ahead in terms of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, you have things that show up, like Jake Bobo going up against their starting slot receiver in one-on-ones, and setting up his route so well in terms of his footwork that he got the guy to cut the wrong direction and go inside when Bobo went outside, and just left him completely turned around. It's stuff like that. And you're just like, okay, it's fun to watch, and it's good to see the guys get out there and really show. So that, and Byron Murphy continues to just turn heads every opportunity.
Yeah. The coach is having a hard time being taken seriously, of not lobbing praise at him, because, I love Mike McDonald's approach to praising players. He's not over the top at all. He'll say a couple of nice words, that they're somewhat vague in addressing a player, but he'll speak more about what they still need to do. The season's ahead of them. They haven't done anything else. They haven't done anything yet, and just kind of keep that ego in check a little bit and keep them working and hungry. It seems to be working. Yeah, he's the real deal, isn't he? I mean,
he really
he's
is.
He's gonna just from everything I'm hearing is like he's just gonna be a big, huge difference maker in that middle and be huge problems for offensive lines and quarterbacks this season, like straight away, which is interesting to me. A couple of just real brief notes. Christian Haynes is apparently working with the ones today, even though Anthony Bradford is there in full pads and going. Bradford's working with the twos. We saw that, and the only reason I mentioned that is we saw that a couple of years ago in the way that Abe Lucas came along. He had a couple 3 weeks of training camp practices where he was mostly running with the twos, and all of a sudden he started running with the ones here and there, and pretty soon he never let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just something to watch, to see if Christian Haynes gets any opportunities to maybe he starts this weekend, and maybe next week it's more of the same. And so you just kind of watch that little detail to see kind of where he's at on the depth chart. Okay, so let's put this roster together. Let's start with the offense. And why don't we just kind of go back and forth and trade position groups and kind of see if we're in agreement or where we have our differences.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead and start with quarterback because I'm already going to create a disagreement when we get to running back. So,
okay. I know, right? Well, maybe not. I think you might be surprised. Okay. Quarterback, Geno Smith, obviously. Sam Howell's the backup. I don't think they've seen enough from PJ Walker to supplant the hope that they have that they can develop Howell.
Howell looked good in the first preseason game. So
yeah, and he continues to kind of improve and get better and his accuracy and so forth in camp. And so it'll be anxious to kind of see what he does in this game. He's obviously going to get at least a full half to be able to be out there and to watch that. PJ Walker could definitely land on a practice squad. He could end up with another team. They will need a quarterback to be around a third quarterback. So we'll see if he makes that cut. So that's what I've got for quarterbacks.
Same. Yep. Okay. At running back, Walker, Charbonnet, and George Holani. I have 3 on the roster, and I have Kenny McIntosh not, and ending up on the practice squad. And that was one of the things I was referring to as being a very difficult decision. But in order to keep the 4th tight end, I had to do that. And I think that McIntosh can slide over to the practice squad and not get picked off waivers.
I did the exact same thing. So
Seriously?
I got Walker, Zach Charbonnet, George Holani, Kenny McIntosh getting cut and landing on the practice squad. I think that he makes it there. He just he didn't do anything last year, and he hasn't done really anything yet this year. We'll see if he explodes in a preseason game.
He could definitely make it hard on Seattle.
Mm-hmm. But George Holani, there's just something about that. And then Coach McDonald was asked about him. He was fairly glowing, as Mike McDonald can be, to George Holani and his approach to practice and his work ethic and running hard and making plays. And we saw that evidenced one of the plays that Mike McDonald brought up about last week in the game against the Chargers was a play that George Holani blocked for out in open space and just clocked a guy on the defensive side and continued to drive him as the play was going around the edge. I think D. Eskridge was the player on that with the ball. And so George didn't even have the ball. So this was just kind of a, what do you do when you don't have the ball in your hands? Kind of a play. Do you make a play? Do you make a play happen? And he did. And so that was really important to McDonald.
It was that jet sweep and he was the lead blocker on it and came in and sealed the linebacker, just drilled him and left there was no edge set, so Eskridge was able to get around that corner and get up the sidelines for I think 21 yards. In large part because of Holani's ability to open up that outside lane.
Yeah, he engaged the block, and then he stuck with it, which was great to see. So that would be kind of, an upset for sure. Like, at the beginning of camp, you saw that he was at mini camp. He was invited, undrafted rookie free agent. He got a contract to be on the 90. He comes in, he plays hard, and he supplants a guy that you probably pencil in before camp starts as being that third running back. And he's shown that he deserves to be there. So that's interesting. So now we move to the tight ends and why you put 4 on there as I did as well.
Yep. So Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, Brady Russell, and then AJ Barner. It really comes down to the fact that Brady Russell's earned a roster spot.
Yes.
AJ Barner is still in that developing, learning stage, and probably in a normal situation wouldn't make this roster, but being
but he's a 4th round draft pick,
a 4th round pick, he's going to make the roster. And so we had to make room for Brady Russell, who's had a great camp and earned that spot. So it became a real tough choice there between McIntosh and Russell. And I think in the end, Brady Russell earned the spot.
Again, you get clues from Mike McDonald about the players he's noticing and paying attention to. And Brady Russell was one of those, a guy that comes in and works hard, does all the right things, is a special teams guy, likely ends up being like a special teams captain. He's that kind of a level of a player, and you don't let those guys go. You especially with, you kind of learn more about what Mike McDonald values and as time goes on. And I think he values players like Brady Russell, guys that do all the dirty work, do all the little things to make the team better in all aspects. And special teams is going to be huge. And he's kind of one of the best players on there that the Seahawks have. And so he's going to make the roster. So I see that the 3 groupings we just did exactly the same way, and I think that's the way it's going to end up being when the cut downs come. I would be shocked if something else happens there, whether they keep that 4th running back and they decide to cut AJ Bonner to see if he could make it through the practice squad.
I don't think he makes it through.
I just don't think that happens.
Yeah, because what you're going to see if that happens is someone's going to see him on that waiver wire and be like, you know what, we were going to draft him. Let's go claim him. We get him for free.
Right.
And we'll stick him on, stash him on our roster as our 4th tight end or whatever, and see what he's got.
100%. I do. I agree. Okay. So wide receivers, I've got 6.
Me too.
Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo. Those are no-brainers. My last 2 are Laviska Shenault Jr., which I believe has earned a shot. And I've said that from the very beginning since we signed him. I thought it was going to be an underrated. And then Derek Young.
Yep.
Is my final wide receiver.
I have the same group. Derek Young's value as a gunner on punt coverage is huge. Not to mention he just continues to he does the little things like blocking downfield. When
McDonald called him the silent executioner.
Yeah.
The silent assassin.
Yeah. He blocks downfield really well in running plays, and plus that size speed combination is, it's hard. You can't coach that, right? It just is. But that means that Dwayne Eskridge, former 2nd round pick, gets cut. Right. As does Aesop Winston Jr., Cody White, and Hayden Hatton. Cody White,
all those guys will be back on the practice squad.
And Aesop Winston have both had good camps. It's hard when guys have a really good camp to cut them, but they're not replacing the guys above them. And yeah, I have. I think Cody White definitely makes the practice squad. Aesop Winston as well, and then we'll see if Eskridge can get through waivers and everything to end up there. But yeah, that's a position group you're gonna see a lot of guys on the practice squad for.
And again, here's another situation with Laviska Shenault and Derek Young. They want bigger physical guys in those spots. And the blocking can't be understated as a wide receiver in this offense. I think it's going to be evident, as evidenced by Jackson Smith and Jigba's block in that game last week.
Oh yeah,
where he came down on the safety and opened up a running lane. I think they just have that mindset. And Jerick Young's like one of the best blocking wide receivers, and the whole room is actually pretty decent. Jake Bobo, Jerick Young, it's something else. So okay, offensive line. So I broke mine down into the 3 position groups.
Yeah, there's an overlap because there's some guys that are multiple. I have 10 offensive linemen making this roster.
I do too.
With one kind of surprise. So at center, Williams and Olubatimi, right? Yes. Guard, Haynes and Tomlinson, Bradford, and then McClendon Curtis.
I've actually got McClendon Curtis in the tackle group.
Okay.
Because
he's been playing a lot of right tackle. Yeah. The thing is, I have him in the guard group, but you can push him over into the tackle group, and that's fine. I have him making the roster because of his ability to back up multiple positions.
Yeah,
both guards
I've got one change
tackle
from you, but go ahead and finish out your tackle group.
And then my tackles, Cross, Lucas Fant, and then I have Gerald making the roster over Stone Forsyth. And Roquan O'Neal, which I know we'll see if that actually happens. I think that, it's one of those things where the other guys haven't shown enough to warrant cutting a draft pick. So
things are getting sketchy for me on Abe Lucas a little bit, but I put him on this roster, but I thought I'd leave it open for conversation. Mine was the same at center. Offensive guard, I had Satoa Lumea in there as my 4th guard, Laken Tomlinson, Bradford, Haynes. And then offensive tackle, I had Cross, Lucas, Fant, McClendon, Curtis. Now, that left me cutting Stone Forsyth, Michael Jarrell, and O'Neal. But you could see Abe Lucas start the season on the PUP list.
Yeah.
That seems to be more likely as the days roll on. We're not hearing anything. It's like he's going to run out of time eventually here. And that would leave a spot open for a guy like Jarrell for me.
See, and the way I have it set up, if Lucas starts on the PUP, it's going to come down to one of the tackles, either Forsyth or O'Neal or Lumea. That's going to be the decision. But I think that Lumea can get to the practice squad, which is part of the reason, the thought process of having him go ahead and get cut. It was a hard cut because of his draft status, especially when you cut Lumea, but then I ended up keeping Gerald because of the fact that he was a draft pick. But Gerald was taken after Lumea in the draft. Yeah, right. So, but it was more of the fact that with Lucas's knee being iffy, I felt like keeping an extra tackle was more likely than keeping an extra guard. So
fair enough.
But yeah, I mean that was one of the ones that I said it was like a hard choice and a lot of internal debate before I finally nailed that down. So that's 25 on offense for both of us.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and the overarching idea there on the offensive lines, we both had 10. We both had 6 wide receivers. We both had 4 tight ends, 3 running backs, 2 quarterbacks. We made the same decisions. We might have interchanged a couple of peripheral players to get there, but I think that I like that overarching idea of 25 and the way that it was constructed. I think that's where it ends up landing. We both could be completely wrong. There could be a 24-26 split somewhere in here, but I think it seems to be looking like 25 and 25 this year for me.
Yeah, heading into camp, I had a 24-26 split with more defense making it, but as this camp has progressed, it's like I can't not include Brady Russell, who was really the guy that I was cutting in order to get that extra defensive player. And also, we've had some defensive players that are going to start the year either IR or on the PUP, and made it easier to keep an extra offensive player.
I didn't play around with the PUP or the injury list in this exercise, but certainly that I think will come into play on a couple different players as we get closer to the season, especially guys like Jerome Baker, for example, who was out a lot, and then he was out now again, and still remains out.
Yeah, so. I just took the guys that are currently injured. Matt Cattell, his season's over because of when he was placed on IR. But Cameron Young and Jarek Reed are both currently on the PUP. I expect them to stay on the PUP. And so
that's a good point. I did have Cameron Young on my 25, on my 53, but we'll see.
I have him on starting on the PUP because I think that
so you kept Miles Adams instead.
I did.
Yeah,
and I'm not real excited about it, but
so I just lumped my defensive linemen all together in the same pile. Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Dre Jones. There's another question mark there. Got hurt again. Coach seems to think it's nothing, but it's something when Dre Jones has barely practiced this year so far. Mike Morris, Jerron Reed. I do have Cameron Young and Jonathan Hankins. I did cut Miles Adams in that group, but only because Cameron Young I have on the roster. Otherwise, it's a flip for me, and I don't know that it necessarily matters. Both those players probably won't play too much.
No, yeah. I mean, Cameron Young, I think, will once he's fully healthy, just simply because he'll be the backup nose tackle, where I don't know if Miles Adams even has a role in the rotation, just because there's lots of guys.
Right.
Dre Jones is an interesting case there with that, that hamstring. It's continuing to bother him. We'll see when he finally gets that healthy, and whether or not that he might start the year on IR, spend the first month getting healthy, and then come back in early October.
Which wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, I don't know that the defense would miss him, honestly, right now. Maybe as time goes on and players get dinged up a little bit, he comes back in fully healthy. That could be a great, actually, little move, a little timing move. Get somebody on the roster initially, and so we'll see what happens there. How about your outside edge guys?
Our edge rushers, I've just got. I mean, to me, this is just straight. No surprises. Nuwasu, Mafe are your starters. Taylor and Hall are your backups.
Yeah, same. And I heard Taylor had a great practice yesterday against Tennessee.
Yep.
Had 2 sacks. And
there's just no one else in that group that would push a guy like Taylor off the roster. I mean, Dre Jones technically could because he's been doing a lot of work on the edge, but with his injuries and stuff, I don't have it. It's not going to happen.
Not yet.
So middle linebacker, what do you got there?
I've got Dodson and Baker. Then I've got Radigan, Knight, and cutting Patrick O'Connell. Patrick reverts to the practice squad.
Yep. And Drake Thomas as well, who just got reactivated off the PUP.
That's a good point.
And I've got him pushing over to the practice squad as well. I think that he'll make it through and end up there. So,
how about safety?
So it's safety, Jenkins and Love, Kayvon Wallace, and then Kobe Bryant.
Me too.
Just haven't seen enough Marquise Blair yet for him to challenge Kobe Bryant's spot.
Right. And you mentioned Jarek Reed is still injured and likely will start the year on the PUP.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward so far.
Yeah. The defense is pretty straightforward. And then go ahead and do corners.
I've got 6 corners.
Mm-hmm.
Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Trey Brown, Michael Jackson, Nehemiah Pritchett, and Artie Burns. I do have DJ James being cut. I have a feeling that you're slightly different than me.
I do. I have DJ James making the roster and Michael Jackson not. And that is entirely because Michael Jackson hasn't practiced. He's been hurt almost the entire camp and still isn't practicing. And I just think that as James continues to come on, and he looked kind of lost early in camp, but has gotten, his feet underneath him in the last week and is starting to to look better, I could see the team going, he's younger, he's cheaper. Let's do that. And if we can get Michael Jackson healthy enough to trade him, then they'll do it. And that being the look. And then of course there's always, the way you've got it with Jackson on and James off made perfect sense, a week ago. But then the way just the injury situation, I just saw it being slightly different now.
I still see it that way. I do see them cutting DJ James only because I don't think he has a defined roster spot. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I think that, someday he may even end up being like a safety. Just a guy that comes in on nickels and whatnot, because he just doesn't have the frame to be an outside guy in the NFL.
He's basically Kobe. He's just Kobe Bryant's version too,
but smaller.
Yeah, but they're both guys that they don't really have the athletic profile of an NFL corner, but they looked good in college playing against college players. So they play smart, but they just athletically are going to struggle at corner. And right. So
I'd much rather keep Jackson, to be completely honest, in this new scheme, with the physicality being of the most importance, and letting DJ James see if he can find another spot somewhere on another roster. Because I don't, keeping him hanging around a practice squad and then back next year and so on and so forth. I'm just not sure if now they drafted him, they looked at his profile and like, we like this guy. I just, after seeing him, I'm just not so sure that it's really what the Seahawks need.
If you're going to practice squad one of these corners, honestly, I want to practice squad D Williams, who was a wide receiver when camp started. And then when he finally got out on the field in that first game, they picked on him. They went after him for like 4 straight plays and didn't complete a pass to him. And yeah, his technique's raw, and you can tell that he's new to the position and hasn't played it since his second year of college, but the size is there. The athleticism is there. There's potential. He just needs time to adapt. And I think there's potential upside there that you don't have with a guy like DJ James. So I would want to see D Williams on the practice squad.
I agree with that. I think, Easton Gibbs came back just yesterday as well, signed again. You mentioned Drake Thomas earlier. There's Sonny Anderson that may have a spot there. Hayden Hatton, Cody White, Aesop Winston. Obviously, those are guys. Kobe Lewis, the running back. These are guys we just didn't mention even in this show.
Yeah, Hayden
Jack
Hatton
Westover
hasn't shown me anything.
No.
And that's why I'm like, you got Cody White, Aesop Winston, Dwayne Eskridge as like guys that actually have shown something and made a case. I haven't seen anything from Hayden Hatton as far as making a case. So, but yeah, Jake Westover is a name that could end up on the practice squad. Definitely. So,
yeah. Garrett Greenfield, Sundahl is the third, offensive center now, on the depth chart. They moved him from tackle to center, essentially. And, so we'll see. A guy like that maybe, would be a practice squad guy.
God, I still think that
Nelson Caesar.
I still think that Lumea, should be getting those reps as the third center. Simply because if he can play center and guard, that makes him way more valuable. And, athletically, he looks like he'd be a really good center. He was a tackle in college, but he just doesn't have the length to play there in the pros. So they moved him to guard, but I could see him at center being actually really good. And so,
Condatas came out with his 53-man projection a couple days ago. And after I did mine, I looked at his, and there's a couple of differences. The players that he had cut that I have on my roster are pretty interesting. So he's got Derek Young being cut. I disagree with him. Cornerback DJ James, he's got cut. I agreed there. He had George Halani being cut. Now that's entirely possible if they feel like they can get him to the practice squad, but I'd shut him down right now. I wouldn't let him put any more film on tape, because I think he's a keeper. Jerick Reed goes to the PUP list. He had cut Michael Jarrell. He cut Cameron Young, but he's on the PUP list. He kind of reverts. Satoa Lamea was another cut that I noticed from him. He also cut, Westover and all the other guys we ended up cutting as well. But I just thought those players I just talked about were ones that he had off the roster that we had on.
At what is it, John Michael Duger of The Athletic. After I completed mine, and I noticed that he'd posted one, and so I kind of looked through that, and he had some things. He had Michael Jackson getting cut, which I was like, whoa! I thought that was a weird thing that I thought up that everyone would yell at me for, and no one would agree with. But
nobody's seen him though. You're right. Nobody's seen him in this camp, so it's out of mind, out of sight.
Yep.
All that kind of stuff.
And so so he had that as well, which I was like, okay. I think he had Patrick O'Connell instead of John Radigan, as the fourth middle linebacker. Okay, that's fine. And let's see, what was the other one? He also had Halani and McIntosh making it. And then he had cut one of the offensive linemen that I had. I think it was Gerald.
So he went with 9 offensive linemen.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. No, interesting. I mean, obviously we're all talking about the same thing, really.
It's very similar.
Manipulating a very small
portion
of this.
It's the back of the roster, right? We're talking about guys, it's a 53-man roster. So we're talking about guys 50 through 53 on it. And as far as making these changes, we're not talking like major ones. The one exception might be the Mike Jackson part, because he was a starter a couple years ago and he can straight up play.
Yes.
But he hasn't been healthy enough to show the new coaching staff what he can do. And
that's going to be awfully frustrating, because I think they would be a great fit in this system.
Yeah. We could be in what going through what Minnesota is going through. So let's not, we like what we're going through right now.
We've got a pretty decent roster. I mean, really.
Yeah. Have you seen any about what Minnesota's dealing with the last couple of days?
No.
JJ McCarthy, their first rounder's quarterback, is out for the year. And then Addison, their receiver, got carted off at practice, and I saw a lot of speculation that it was an ACL, so he may be out for the year. And this team that looked like they could bounce back and have a good year and maybe get in as a wild card team, now suddenly looks like they're going to struggle.
Chicago.
Yeah, they could be last in their division.
Yeah, interesting. I think really the success of this this team, more than ever now, hinges on this offensive line. I really like the Connor Williams thing, but still the thing at offensive tackle there with Abe Lucas. Now George Fant may be fine and fit in, and I'm not sure, but I would love to see Christian Haynes kind of take that spot just because long-term kind of ramifications there. But to get Abe Lucas back would just be so nice for this team and my projection as far as how far they could go this year. If Abe Lucas does not come back for whatever reason, I think it limits us a little bit on the offense and how effective we can be.
Because you've got that right side of the offensive line, right tackle and right guard, both being, a problem. And that's going to be hard to overcome. Teams are going to take advantage of that. Now you're right. Christian Haynes, can supplant Bradford and continue to improve over the course of the season. That can help, but they need Lucas back. And I know you're
still no word whatsoever.
Yeah. I think they're not looking at preseason for him. They're
Even for the regular season start, man, he's got to come back to practice, at least get and work in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I look at what they did with Jordan Brooks last year. It was a similar situation. Did not do anything in camp, got healthy the week of game 1 and got some snaps week 1. Like they worked him back slowly, but they got him in for a few snaps.
Right.
And so that could be the type of situation we're looking at with Lucas, where he gets back, where he's practicing, he gets cleared to play. He's practicing a little bit, comes in, gets a couple of series just to, like, get his feet wet and stuff in this game. And then it becomes a situation where he picks up, week 2 and week 3 and runs from there.
I hope so. Anything else you want to cover?
No, this was, like I said, this was a fun exercise.
Yeah, for sure.
There just hasn't been anyone that's like jumped out and surprised. There hasn't been a Jake Bobo in this year's camp. Maybe George Holani counts.
Yeah.
But for him, he's that third
DJ
running
Dallas
back
guy. He's taken DJ Dallas's snaps from last year, and Dallas would have 3 or 4 carries a game, maybe, or be in, for 10 snaps and have an effect on the offense for 2 or 3 plays.
Yep. And so him beating out Kenny McIntosh for that third. I mean, that's kind of the big surprise. There just hasn't been. There just hasn't been a big surprise so far of a guy just showing up and being like, nope, I may not have been drafted, but I'm better than a bunch of these guys.
And no major disappointments. The same. Cool. So we're playing a game on Saturday. It'll be kind of fun to watch everyone play. Hopefully no injuries. We'll come back next week and kind of talk about what we saw. And then moving forward to that last game against Cleveland at home will be interesting as well. We'll talk about cut downs and final roster reactions and so forth. And we're going to do a prediction show the first week of September, and then we're off and running. We've got, preview shows and recaps after that. I think I'm going to be gone for a little bit of time in September. You've got a guest lined up for the show during that time to help you
a couple different guests coming on. They're going to be fun.
That'll be fun. Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk, the show Seahawks Playbook podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can have those land in your feed every time we release a new show. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.